everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Want to remind everybody, hit that like, share, and subscribe button for me. There's a PayPal link down there for anybody that wants to share some love. And we're not going to do a panel link just yet. We might later on. But tonight, I just wanted to talk about shotgun blast of notices that I'm sending out in relations to all of my research over the last 8 years. And the culmination hereof is seeking resolution through equity. And that equity is a private venue and not a public venue. And that's one of the biggest problems with everything that's done in this societal venue system that we have, that we believe we're subject to. 8 years ago, I started out my research and specifically seeking that resolution to being wronged. Started out talking about I was going to sue them, this and that. And over my years of research, I found out that's the wrong approach. Simply for one of the main factors that we all have to realize. And just like I've complained or beseech people to quit sending their children to that public education system and instead instill in them the spiritual talents that they already have and let those develop into their needs in their adult lives so that they can use God's money. Thinking that we need this materialistic venue of a fiat currency issued by a military government and having to take upon some kind of military protectorate capacity is a coward. I'll explain to you the story of David and Goliath when he was shoot all these weapons and armaments from his native peoples when he was going to go up against Goliath and he couldn't take them. They would have bogged him down. He knew this. He's a little bitty boy. He can't wear the armor of men, but he can wear the armor of God. Isn't that the true protectorate? So in my research, I changed my ways because one of the fundamental things that I had to realize is my own education indoctrinated me just like my parents' education. So their education was an indoctrination just like their parents' indoctrination. And just because the form of education changed doesn't mean that the education itself changed. It's still based on the principle of the damn name. Remember Roots, Kunta Kinte, and they tried to tell him his name was Toby. See, that's somebody else's definition. Even the name Keith Orland that my mom and dad gave, that's their definition. And I think we need to truly instill in each other to start seeking within thyself, know thyself, and take upon a new name. And I'll be damned if their system doesn't agree and mirror that same thing, even to the point that you can change your name anytime you want for any reason, so long as it's not nefarious, because it's supposed to be for a good name. So in that indoctrination, I realized one of the problems was me. And this is why I shed off that name. It's not about my name. It's not about me. It's not about anything but what I've done and what I'm going to do to show that I'm learning from what I've done. So everything I've done in my research has just been a lot of research, but in that I've done certain things. If you saw the thumbnail, that's a letter of some sort that my companion got from the clerk of courts, and I just abated it on the envelope. Now, if ever comes to find out that that court case within that document is one of the ones that they've got with her as a firm name and an obligor, then they're in a little bit of a problem. She's been retired. She did work as a U.S. citizen resident for the federal government as a teacher. She has an IPERS retirement account and everything. But she's retired. No longer subject to the civilian capacity, again, a military capacity, of a contractor of the federal government by residency. A United States citizen, meaning a United States business. That's the mistake that all of us are making. We're making a false claim of a resident for income tax purposes without knowing ourselves what we're saying. That's our own fault. Granted, the public education system is supposed to be for the general welfare of the people as part of that general welfare in the Constitution. But the general welfare is the common layman. So they only teach the common layman what the common layman necessarily needs. And the common layman doesn't necessarily need to know civics and contract law and things like that. They're just the low level people that they take upon their profit system, that fiat currency, that military currency. They take advantage of your sweat equity labor because you don't know any better, and that's your fault. This is the story of the prodigal son. See, the guy goes out with his inheritance, his estate, and squanders it as a spendthrift. That's what Social Security is for. A spendthrift trust is a protective trust for the trustee. It protects the trustee. Because the very thing that, hey, the beneficiary is a spendthrift. He doesn't know what he's doing. We gave him his property. He didn't know what to do with it, so we had to take it back. Things like that. Unenlist or quit the military. That's that DD 214 that the military men get. That is for specifically two purposes. Resignation or retirement or discharge. See, if you're retired from the military, that's the equivalency that they gave you the retirement. Whereas if you resign, that's a voluntary quit. So there are distinctions in them. Anyway, the point here is that through all this research, again, going back to the scripture, study to shew thyself worthy and approved, so you can rightly divide the word of truth. Because if you can't rightly divide the word of truth, and it's because you haven't studied to shew thyself worthy and approved to do so, that's your fault. All this research, again, in a way to seek resolution has changed over time as the form of resolution. Like I said earlier, I began this stuff thinking I was going to sue them. Slowly turned my ways, and that was a number of years back. Took me a couple years, but then I realized it was the wrong way to go about it, and have been searching and researching certain aspects of equity, contract law, and trust law ever since, and found certain ties through all of the contracts, which are established under trust, and that's where equity resides. See, equity's maxims speak about the beneficiary is deemed to be the true owner. It talks about equity imputes an intent to fulfill an obligation. An intent to fulfill an obligation are the contract terms and conditions. So it encompasses a contract that forms a trust. And that's the only way you get equity, is by making sure that it's an express trust. And the only one that's going to do that is you. Public service is a public trust. And while they'll admit that, they'll all say, well, I'm just doing my job. You have to talk to my boss. Well, who's ultimately responsible if everybody's got to talk to their boss? And nobody knows you're the boss. And the only way you can be the boss is with that knowledge. You have to be able to tell them what that trust is. You have to be able to tell them what the contract terms and conditions are. You have to be able to define or use or discern the definitions that they're using for their constructs. And that's why I say, when you look at them codes and you find out those definitions, United States business means a United States citizen. United States is a corporation and not a federal government. Federal government means all entities of the government of the United States, including the United States Postal Service and the Postal Regulatory Commission. So, let me find my screen here. And what you have before you, folks, is 39 U.S. Code 2002, capital of the Postal Service. Capital of the Postal Service. A, the initial capital of the Postal Service shall consist of the equity as reflected in the budget of the President of the Government of the United States in the former Post Office Department. The value of assets and the amounts of liabilities transferred to the Postal Service upon the commencement of the operations of the Postal Service shall be determined by the Postal Service, subject to the approval of the Comptroller General in accordance with the following guidelines. And then it's got those guidelines. But the main portion is the very first statement. The initial capital of the Postal Service shall consist of the equity. Remember, I spoke earlier of the sweat equity labor in all of those contracts for employment. As reflected in the budget of the President of the Government of the United States. Federal government means all entities of the government of the United States in the former Post Office Department. That's where the budget lies. Now it's the Judicial Officer Department, a neutral and independent forum within the United States Postal Service, comprising of the judicial officer, the administrative law judge, and the Postal Service Board of Contract Appeals. So we have the one that provides the initial capital for the budget, which is the equity, through the collateralized contract through the United States, a corporation. Comptroller General. (39 U.S. Code 3005), false representations. I want to ask everybody, are you a United States citizen? I want to know how many people will sit there and say, yes, I'm a United States citizen. I want to know how many homeless people will say, yes, I'm a United States citizen. I want to know how many people that have retired will say, yes, I'm a United States citizen. I want to know how many people that have been discharged or resigned or anything else say, I'm a United States citizen and not have a permit to do business in the United States. 12 U.S.C. 614. Proper communications with the Federal Reserve outlining your board of directors, your trust, your corporate documents, all of it. If you haven't done that, you're not running a proper United States business. So what's the state doing with the resident for income tax purposes? Oh, that's state income tax purposes. Of course, under the state's blue sky securities laws, wherein you pool all of the investments from private parties under those supposed statutes as assets and then collateralize them with your bonding system in a pooled investment trust that is then named in your name and invested in the stocks. U.S. Code 3012, civil penalties. Shall be liable to the United States for a civil penalty in an amount of not to exceed 50,000 for each mailing of less than 50,000 pieces, 100,000 for each mailing of 50 to 100,000, with an additional 10,000 for each additional 10,000 pieces above 100, not to exceed 2 million. That seems to be a common amount. If any proceeding at any time under this section, the defendant shall be entitled as a defense or counterclaim to seek judicial review if not already had. That judicial review is that judicial officer department, the administrative law judge with the judicial officer and the Postal Service Board of Contract Appeals. Tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I have some mailings ready to go out. First one is the tort claim going out to the governor. The next one is the IRS TEGE classification, and it's got a mail code on there. This is the form 13909 as a referral to the judicial officer, Andrea Dreyer, and her misappropriation of funds through a resident identifier that I told her was not valid for income tax purposes. And then she sent me a notice dismissing it, but then sent me a letter a couple weeks later saying costs are taxed to the defendant. Then there's another one to another office of the Internal Revenue Service. These are two different addresses for two different forms. This is the 3949A referral, which is going to reference to the case and the docket and everything, how it had zero charges, zero finances, no long title, no bond was found. all these things, and then all of a sudden, Andrea Dreyer issued a bond for a bench warrant, and then I had that supposedly withdrawn, and they never noted anything about a withdrawal of the bond. They just posted a note, bond, and didn't post anything about withdrawal of the bond. So the bond was issued, and of course, they couldn't withdraw it, even though she said she would. It was already issued. It was already pooled and collateralized. Oops. And that's the one that's going to show that they converted again, for the 94th time, the last name to a firm name and the Social Security number to an obligor number. And I never even gave them a Social Security number this time. I never gave them an address, nothing. They did it all on their own little own, without any authority. I didn't tell them they could do that. They didn't communicate with me about no debt. I didn't give them any letter consenting to them being able to communicate with me about a debt. These people are ridiculous. So that's those three. And those, of course, are going to the executive level at the state of Iowa to the governor for the tort claim, and then the federal level for the IRS. And then I've got another notice, just a blanket shotgun blast notice to all kinds of people that I've entered a tort claim with the governor, and it's merely seeking equity. In seeking equity, equity imputes an intent to fulfill an obligation. So I recognize the contractual obligations set before me, but they're not valid as a United States citizen. So I need all records corrected, all creditors cleared or made whole, and the accounts cleared to a balance zero, and any remainder is a merger of the estate in a new trust that is still able to perform business, but it's just got a new recognition, private. So I've got all these that I'm sending out to state and federal. Remember that Bureau of Vital Statistics jurisdiction chart? So we've got one to the mayor at City Hall, and he's going to give notice to the city attorney, the city clerk, and Senate agency at his level. We've got one to the Iowa Social Security Administration, one to the Black Hawk County Registrar, one to Iowa Department of Revenue, Black Hawk County Clerk of Court, Iowa Secretary of State, Paul D. Pate, Administration Services, Black Hawk County Attorney, Black Hawk County Board of Supervisors, Black Hawk County Sheriff, Iowa Department of Public Safety, Commissioner's Office, Orrin Pape State Office Building. U.S. Commercial Services, Des Moines, Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, Public Assistance Bureau, Chief, Dubuque County Courthouse, County Recorder, Registrar. They call it recorder over there. Black Hawk County calls it registrar. They're the same thing. State Treasurer's Office, and it's wise to look these up. You don't go just saying State Treasurer's Office, Iowa, and your claim is Arkansas, so you put State Treasurer's Office, Arkansas. Look it up and make sure that's what they're called in that state. They will use variances. Office of the Attorney General of Iowa. White House, the Office of Public Engagement. We are talking about rules of engagement. Department of Health and Human Services, a state recovery program. That's the one I tell you, all states are required to have a state recovery program, and it's regulated by the Health and Human Services. Social Security Administration, Office of Public Inquiries and Communications Support, as well as Commissioner Martin O'Malley. United States Health and Human Services Department, Secretary Xavier Becerra. Judicial Officer Department, U.S. Postal Service. Judicial Officer, Judge Alan R. Caramella. Directorate for Public Inquiry and Analysis, Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, Pentagon. Internal Revenue Service, Commissioner Danny Werfel. And that's, even though we sent those two notices to the IRS earlier, like I said, those are different addresses. Same with this. This is a different address to the commissioner, so he gets notice. U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the Honorable Alejandro Mayorkas, going through a lot of shit in that Senate meetings. U.S. Department of Justice, Attorney General Merrick Garland. Office of the Staff Judge Advocate, Adjutant General and Chaplain, Iowa National Guard. And that's your militia center, folks. Your National Guard of each state. U.S. Department of Commerce, Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo. Remember that resident determination? Yeah. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals, Chairperson Judge Erica S. Beardsley. U.S. Department of the Treasury, Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen. Now that's the one that goes with the U.S. Department of Commerce and that resident determination by the board. The Secretary of Commerce as chair, executive chair, and the Secretary of Treasury. And then we have U.S. Department of State, Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken. So there's like 33 of them going out. Interesting number. That was only coincidence. So anyway, that's it for now. Like I said, I'm only seeking resolution, and if I attain that, great. I'm going to share exactly step by step what that resolution is. But understand, it's going to have a lot of different things you're going to have to do, because it's a lot of comprehension, that state's vital statistics jurisdiction chart, both the birth certificate and death certificate, and how all that plays in your life. Those are all the people that are getting the business information. If you're not doing business with them, then it ain't none of their business. But everybody's consumed with that birth certificate and having these births in the hospital and making sure that they know what's good for their kids. So you establish a business but don't even know it. Great job. Study to shew thyself worthy and prove, folks. And with that, you know me. I love you. But I don't give an ass rats whether you love me back. That's on you. I don't care. That means I don't care if you don't respect me. I don't care if you hate me. It's time to start doing shit for yourself, doing your own self-reflection. and think about what you're really doing. Signing over whatever and not realizing it. I got a lot more information coming. Like I showed you a few of those codes from the Postal Service. That's where the equity sits. It's the capital of the Postal Service. I don't see why you wouldn't be dealing with them. So in the meantime, may God bless you and have a good night, everybody.